Now, leads us beautifully into a very, very popular segment always. None of us can ever know everything about Exo, but there seems to be one man that does, Murray Dudding. He comes and gives us the tips and tricks where all you great Exo users will, I'm sure, going to learn something. Over to you, Murray.
Thank you for that wonderful and rather auspicious introduction, Grant. So yes, in this segment, we are going to run through some of the new features in MYOB Exo. Yes, this is the Exo user group forum. So let's talk a little bit about the product. So in this segment, we're going to look at a new feature that MYOB's introduced called, disconnecting users, also called in-app messaging. So we're going to look at how the in-app messaging works and how the disconnection features works. This is something that's been asked for quite a while. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very popular feature amongst Exo users once you upgrade to that version. We're going to take a look at some changes that have been introduced around extra fields. They've taken a look at extra fields and restructured the way they are as their default settings, which will improve processing speeds. They've also simplified the process for adjusting those extra fields and grouping them into areas that make them more functional within our master record account. So we'll take a quick look at how that's set up as well. What it enables a lot of users to do is take away some of the work that traditionally you'd come to your Exo partner for, and so now you'll be able to do it fairly simply yourselves. And lastly, we're going to take a look at some job costing features. This is a bit of a recap on one of the other user group forums that we did. Backed by popular demand, we had some requests for job costing features. So I hope all those people that requested are tuned in and watching that segment. As I mentioned, the first thing we're going to take a look at is some new functionality called in-app messaging. And like the name suggests, it enables you to send messages out to other Exo users. It also provides the functionality to disconnect those users, which is something that can be really useful if you're planning, for example, a month-end rollover where you want everyone to have completed their work before you carry out that rollover. So how does it happen? How do we set it up? If I pull across our MYOB Exo, if we go to staff, and I'm just going to open up the Exo Business Administrator account. Inside the Authority tab, there is now this checkbox here that allows you to, or gives that user access to disconnect users. So obviously something that you don't want to give to everyone. A business where anyone can disconnect anyone else's session whenever they feel like it is probably going to cause a few frustrations from time to time. So obviously you need to be a little bit judicious about who has access to that. But it's a feature that I'm sure is going to be very popular. So how do we use it? If I go to File, Database Tools, and then go to our Message Users option, what I can do from here is I can create a new message, and then we've got who it comes from, the email address that's linked to your Exo business account, that's linked to your Exo account, and then we've got an action. So we can request a logout, we can force a logout, or we can just send a message only, which is what I'm going to use in this first example, and then we'll run through the second scenario next. So in our scenario that I'm going to run through, we've got our month-end rollover kicking off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So first thing in the morning, I'm going to come in and I'm going to send a message to all our users, just giving them a reminder that, hey, at 5 o'clock this afternoon, we're going to be doing a rollover. So once I've put my message only in, I can hit send, and I've got another account set up, which I'll drag across. It wasn't quite quick enough. So my logged in user and has received this message already because I didn't grab him fast enough. And so that's the message that will come through to all of the logged in Exo users. Now, if someone logs in a little bit later after the message has been sent, this message should pop up as soon as they log in. So they all get that message. Now, 5 o'clock's rolled round. I need to get started on my monthly rollover, and I need to make sure that I've got a clear system, that everyone's logged out. So I'm going to create a new message. This time I'm going to change my action to force log out, and I'm going to say something like, that. Now, see this log out before, this disconnect, this is the time that we can set to disconnect everyone's sessions. So by default, it automatically gives them a minute. So our 5 minutes for the purposes of this demo are going to be reduced down a bit because no one wants to sit around for 5 minutes waiting for that to happen. But the key point to take away is that you can define when the session gets logged out. And so, for example, you could schedule this in the morning. I could have set this up and sent at the same time as I did my other message, and just have the log out time set to 5 p.m. So that's quite a good feature. All right, so I'm going to hit send. I'm going to quickly grab Greg's login so that we might be here when it actually pops up. And then once we get that message, it'll give them a short amount of time before we log out. And so we can see here, 11:54:38 is when we'll need to be logged off by. So that gives us just a few seconds before this application closes. So we're going to sit here, and while we're waiting for that to shut, which will only be in a few seconds time, I'll describe some of the other features that are in the messaging system. So you may have noticed that there's a couple of buttons up the top, disconnect user and disconnect users, or disconnect all users, or something along those lines. So those applications, those little features, allow us to instantly disconnect a single user or users. So for example, if you've found that your Exo partner has yet again left their Exo session open when they were working on your server, there we go, Greg's login just disconnected for us. It gives you the ability to close that session out, that you know that person's not there. They're not in there working on it. Mary's gone away on leave, but she's forgotten to close her session. So we can go in and automatically disconnect that. Obviously, you need to be a little bit judicious about using them because you don't want to kill people's sessions when they're in the middle of something. But yeah, some useful features there. So that's in app messaging. And as I said, I'm pretty excited about it. Okay, the next section we're going to look at is extra fields and some of the additional functionality that have been brought into extra fields. So let's close there. So extra fields have now been organized vertically into 2 columns in our account master record screens, and have also been organized into 3 horizontal columns inside our transactional screens. And for some of the screens that we've been used to, like sales orders, that's been around for a bit, but it's now been standardized across the application. So you've got some consistency over those screens. If we quickly go into a sales order, I'll create a new sales order here. Here are our extra fields for the sales order header. And so I've added in a whole bunch of fields, and one of the key points to note here is that we've actually got a scroll bar on the right hand side now. In the past, the more extra fields you added, the less real estate you had to actually work with your lines, your sales order lines or purchase order lines. So now they've kind of made it a setting so that obviously you can make this bigger, but if you choose to scrunch up your extra fields, we've got a scroll bar that allows you to look at those extra fields without giving up valuable real estate. So if I type in our customer order number, and then by simply tabbing through each one of these fields, it logically takes me from left to right, entering in all of our additional fields. If we throw in stock code and take a quick look at our sales order line periscope, you'll see that our sales order line extra fields are all showing here. I created 7 extra fields on this database just to show you that we can fit a whole lot more extra fields in here now. In the past, you were limited to 1 or 2 extra fields that would appear in the sales order line periscope, but now they've included all of the extra fields that you've set up against the sales order line will all appear inside the sales order line periscope. If I got carried away, I think it ends up putting another column down on the 2 columns on the right hand side. So the idea behind these changes is to improve efficiencies, particularly around processing. So let's close out of the sales order now. And we're going to jump into a stock item and take a look at one of our stock items. So if we take a look at the extra fields that have been set up against the stock item, we can see that we've got a few extra fields here. We don't have heaps and heaps, but we've got a few extra fields. But one of the things that kind of, and this does happen quite a lot, is these extra fields have just grown organically over time. And so, you know, as the need arises, an extra field gets added to a debtor account, or it gets added to a stock item. And so as they get added in, they kind of just clump, you know, they just get added one after the other without much thought into their layout. For those who look at the extra fields and they go, actually, no, we do need to group these, we do need to rearrange them, they'd typically reach out to their support partner, and then we would go through the process of adjusting those extra fields. It was achievable, it is achievable, but it's done by trial and error. It's a long-winded process, and involves changing sequence numbers and then saving and then going and reviewing your work and making sure, oh yeah, no, that doesn't look quite right, need to tweak it a little bit more. It's a painful process. And because of that, most Exo users didn't undertake the process. MYOB now have introduced grab my Exo configurator, have introduced an extra fields search screen. So not only have they made the whole process of realigning extra fields simpler, but they've introduced this whole new search screen. So, you know, I can search on stock items table, for example, and here it is. Here's our stock items table. So in order for us to group these stock items into something that's a little bit more relevant and meaningful, I'm going to simply drag and drop some of these fields. And you'll forgive me while I look down, because I do have this printed out. Hopefully some of these extra fields will be familiar to some of you. Push that one back up into here. And if I take these so that they're actually in the right order, that would help. Okay, so we can adjust these fields, move them around, and it's simply a case of dragging and dropping. So a lot easier than it used to be. Save. I go into our Exo screen now. Close out of our stock items because I'm going to need to refresh. Now we'll go back to our stock, and we can see that within, you know, the space of a minute, I've realigned those fields, grouped them into logical sections, and created some white space so that it's easier for us to actually get the information that we've captured in those extra fields. So now, what I would imagine is that users are going to start making these extra field adjustments themselves. So taking the work off us, putting the power in your hands. Now, the last thing that we wanted to touch on was some job costing functionality backed by popular demand. So I'm going to load up our job costing screen. I hope I just loaded up job costing screen there. I did. Let's bring it across. Now, some of the features that have been introduced allow us to control the functionality within job costing. And I'll just quickly demonstrate what I mean by going into a job. So what I'm talking about here is these right mouse click features. And in the past, everyone who has access to job costing had access to all of these features. And it didn't matter what their role within the organization was. If they had access to that screen, they had access to that right mouse click functionality. But that might not be the best way of running your business. It might not be the best thing to do for individuals. So now we can control which right mouse click features they get access to. So for example, if we need to make sure that someone doesn't have access to cancel lines or write off lines, which has a business impact, we've got the ability to do that. So let's go back into Exo config. I'm going to bring up our job costing menu, job costing options, I should say. And here are our job costing options here. So we can note that it's on a per tab basis. So we've got control over all the tabs within job costing, quoting, timesheets, costs, invoice, etc. The one we want to adjust is this one right here. Click on the box on the right-hand side. Click on the box again on the right-hand side. We can now control or at least select or deselect different features. You'll note that this is a user profile, so we can control this on a user by user basis. We just assign those users to that user profile that we set up that has access to the tools that we want them to have access to. So if I untick, for example, the cancel on the write-off line, make sure that we untick it in all of the different places that it's available in. Click OK, hit save. Go back to job costing. Again, I'm going to need to refresh settings, so I'm going to cancel out of my job, close that screen down. I love these shortcuts. They just make job costing so much quicker than it used to be. The favorites down the left-hand side, if you don't use them, start using them. It's just way quicker. Now, if we go back into our cost tabs, because I only changed the cost tab, didn't touch anything else, I'm going to mark all the lines so we see all the features. You can see we're missing the cancel on the write-off line, and same with our marked lines as well. The cancel on the write-off have gone. Okay, so if you've got any questions around anything that I've just shown you, or any other questions around Exo, then make sure you put them in the Q&A comments. That's it for this section. And I'll look forward to seeing you again in the second segment where we take a look at some fan favorites. All right, cheers folks, and talk to you soon.